A door slams, voices rise, and suddenly the palace is no longer silent. Prince Harry storms into King Charles's private study, eyes burning with betrayal. "I deserve to know the truth. Why did you never tell me?" In his hand a photo, a boy, a brother, a secret buried for decades, now rising to the surface. Charles freezes, a teacup crashes to the floor. What unfolds next isn't just a family drama, it's a royal reckoning, because behind the crown lies a secret that threatens to rewrite everything we thought we knew about bloodlines, legacy, and loyalty. Immediate shock. The scene opens with a sudden crash. Prince Harry burst into King Charles's private study, eyes burning with betrayal. The quiet hum of the palace is instantly pierced by a voice full of emotion. "I deserve to know the truth. Why did you never tell me?" The words land like thunder in the room. This isn't a calm conversation. This is a storm. Charles looks up, startled. His hand shakes. The china cup slips from his fingers and shatters on the polished floor. Tea spills everywhere. But it's not the mess on the carpet that matters. It's the secret now spilling between father and son. Charles, his face goes pale, his mouth opens, but nothing comes out. A pause stretches thick with unspoken history. This was never supposed to happen. The king had managed to bury this part of his past for decades. Years of silence, discretion, sealed documents, and trusted aides. But all of that shattered the moment Harry stepped through the door. Because this confrontation, it wasn't just about the truth, it was about trust or the loss of it. And Harry isn't backing down. This is personal. This is years of emotional distance boiled over. The son who walked away from the institution is now back, not to play royal games, but to unearth what's been hidden. His eyes flickered to a nearby portrait of Diana. She seems to be watching the whole thing, and that only fuels the moment further. The king finally speaks, his voice low. "You don't understand, there were reasons." But Harry shakes his head. "You had a son, another child, and you never told me." No amount of royal calm can fix this. This isn't about headlines. It's about blood, about identity, about years stolen by secrecy. And as father and son stand facing each other, the air between them charged with pain and legacy, one thing is now certain: the crown isn't the only thing that's inherited. Secrets are to the hidden son emerges. It started with whispers. A faded page in one of Charles' old handwritten journals, a mention of a boy. He has her eyes, but no name, no details. It meant nothing at first, just scribbles from decades past, until a palace archivist stumbled across an old photograph in the Clarence House records. A boy, maybe 10 years old, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, standing alone near a window, smiling awkwardly. The file had no date, no official label, just a sticky note. "Do not catalogue." That's when the unease started. A trusted aide, long retired, spoke in hushed tones to a friend. "We saw his face once, couldn't place him, but he looked familiar." That one line passed through palace walls like smoke, quiet culling, impossible to grab, but impossible to ignore. The boy in the photo wasn't part of any known royal outing. Not one press record matched his image. It was as if he'd been there, and then erased. Back then, Charles' team moved fast. The photo was pulled from digital archives. Mentions of overseas trips were edited. Even personal diaries were sealed tighter. Anyone asking questions got polite silences in return. The palace method: handle it, hide it, move on. But for Prince Harry, the seed had been planted. He couldn't shake it. The face in the photo, the way it echoed his own. There was something in the eyes, something real, something wrong. And suddenly every memory he had, a feeling like he was being kept on the outside, started to make a new kind of sense. He started asking questions quietly at first, then with growing purpose. The more he learned, the more he began to believe this wasn't just rumor, this was family. And now, with one photograph and a handful of fragments, a decades-old secret had started to rise, not as a scandal, but as a missing piece of Harry's own story, Harry's emotional discovery. It was late, the children were asleep, and Harry sat alone in his study, thumbing through boxes of old family records. What started as a quiet curiosity researching his lineage for Archie's school project suddenly veered into something much deeper. Tucked behind a stack of military records, he found a folder. Inside it, a photo, the same boy, same face, still no name. Only this time it came with something more. A short handwritten note in Charles' script. "He'll never be one of us, but he is mine." Harry froze, his breath caught, the room around him spun. That note wasn't a metaphor, it wasn't poetic, it was clear, it was real. And it changed everything. He stared at the boy's face, his face in a way there was no mistaking it, the curve of the jaw, the eyes, the feeling of something shared. Harry felt the blood drained from his face. His father had another son, a brother he never knew about, a life hidden in the shadows while Harry was pushed into the spotlight. That night, he couldn't sleep. He showed the photo to Meghan, her face going still as she read the note. "You have to know," she said quietly. "And you have every right to ask." The next day, Harry made a decision. He reached out privately, cautiously, to run a DNA test. No palace staff, no royal labs, just a discreet third party. It wasn't about proof anymore. It was about truth. Waiting for those results felt endless. Every moment brought more questions, more memories re-examined through a new lens. Why was his father distant? Why did so many things feel half-explained? And when the results came in, it was exactly what he feared and expected. The boy was family, and Harry knew what had to happen next. Gathering proof. By now, Harry was no longer just suspicious, he was convinced. But one photo and a DNA test weren't enough, not for the world, and not for the weight of the confrontation ahead. He needed undeniable evidence. Quietly, he began piecing things together. He reached out to an old palace aide, long retired, who'd served Charles in the 1980s. Hesitant at first, the man finally gave him. There was a trip somewhere in the Middle East. He came back, different, quieter. A year later, there were whispers, but we were told to forget it. The name of the woman surfaced, a brief liaison, not a scandal, just something unspoken. Documents hinted at hush payments, discreet property support, a single trip arranged for medical care, enough to form a line. Harry then dug into Charles' old diaries, long thought sealed, but in a scan shared during book research he found a telling line. "He has my fingers. It frightens me." The page had been skipped over in public releases, but there it was, hidden in plain sight. Even more chilling. A former footman recalled seeing a child visit the palace once in the early 90s. "He looked just like you," he told Harry. "But he left before lunch, never saw him again." It all aligned, stories, documents, photos, and Harry, now staring at a truth too large to ignore, realized it wasn't just a secret, it was a cover-up, one designed to erase a life, and in doing so it erased trust. He wasn't coming to Charles as a prince, he was coming as a brother. The confrontation moment, the room was the same, Charles' private study, books lining the walls. The portrait of Diana quietly watching from the far side, and Harry once again stepped inside. But this time not as the boy seeking approval. He entered as a man with truth in his hands. Charles looked up, already sensing it. He knew, and before Harry could even speak there was silence. Thick, charged, then came the words, "This boy is my brother, or half-brother, isn't he?" The king didn't deny it. His hands gripped the chair, his mouth moved, but no words came. His eyes dropped, not in defiance, but in shame. Finally, Charles whispered, "There were reasons." But Harry interrupted, "Don't say it was for him. This wasn't protection. This was abandonment." Charles leaned back, the portrait of Diana staring behind him like a quiet witness. He looked smaller now, older, worn down by decades of silence. He began to speak, not in defense, but in sorrow. He explained the pressure, the fear, the institution's demand to preserve image at any cost, how admitting to the child would have meant war with the press, scandal, maybe collapse. But all of that sounded hollow now, because across from him sat a son whose heart had been shattered not by politics but by silence. As the conversation ended, no one yelled, no one cried, but the silence that followed wasn't peace, it was the sound of a legacy unraveling. King Charles defends himself. For a long moment after Harry's confrontation, King Charles said nothing. The weight of the truth pressed down on him, not just as a monarch, but as a father who had made a choice decades ago. Finally, he leaned forward, voice quiet, but deliberate. It was to protect him from everything. The press, the crown, our name. He wasn't excusing it, he was explaining. But to Harry it felt like deflection. Charles spoke of the dangers, the relentless meteor storms, the expectations, the palace politics. He claimed it wasn't cruelty, but caution. He was never fit for this life. He would have been hunted. Then came something unexpected, tears. Charles, his voice cracked. He admitted that keeping the boy a secret was the hardest decision he ever made, but one he felt forced into by the demands of the crown. You don't understand what it was like. We didn't choose freely, everything was controlled. Harry, standing stiff, didn't interrupt, but his silence screamed louder than words. The explanation sounded hollow now. He remembered growing up in a world that had always seemed emotionally distant, and now he saw why. Charles continued drawing comparisons to history. He spoke of other royals whose scandals had rocked the family. Affairs, illegitimate errors, secrets that nearly cost the monarchy its power. We learned from the past. We chose silence because the crown demands it. But that defense didn't soften the blow. If anything, it only confirmed the truth. Harry feared that in this family, image mattered more than people, legacy more than love. Still, in that moment, something shifted between them. Charles wasn't just the king, he was a man unraveling, a man who had been hiding from his own choices. And Harry saw it not with sympathy, but with painful clarity. He turned to leave, one last sentence left hanging in the room. You didn't protect him, you erased him. And with that, the space between father and son became something far harder to cross. Harry's emotional turmoil in the days that followed. Harry's world spiraled. The confirmation wasn't a relief. It was a wound. A brother he never knew about. A father who kept it secret. And a legacy that suddenly felt less royal and more broken. He struggled to sleep. Every memory now felt rewritten. His own childhood, his place in the family, even his understanding of Diana's role. He wondered if she ever knew, and if she didn't, what else was kept from them both. You lied to me all my life, he muttered during one sleepless night, not to anyone in the room, just out loud, trying to make sense of it. The betrayal was deeper than a hidden sibling. It was about trust, identity, the very structure of who he believed he was. He shared it with Meghan, who wrapped her arms around him, not trying to fix it, just present. She told him gently, you're not alone in this anymore. But Harry didn't want comfort, he wanted resolution. He thought of his role in the royal family, what it had meant, what he walked away from, and no, it all seemed like a performance built on lies. Even the legacy he was meant to pass to Archie now felt tainted. What kind of family are we? He asked one morning, staring at the ceiling. He started keeping a journal again, just like his mother once did. He wrote it all down, not for headlines, not for books, just to keep from exploding, to hold on to something real. But the one thing he knew for sure, he wasn't going to let this secret stay buried, not for his father, not for the palace, not even for the crown. The truth had surfaced, and it wasn't going back. Under royal storm breaks publicly. It started with a leak, one photo, grainy but unmistakable, the boy, the same one from Harry's search. Suddenly, it was everywhere. Headlines screamed royal secret son exposed. Social media caught fire. Within hours, royal secret son to Brendan. Globally, the palace's carefully managed silence cracked open. Journalists flooded the gates. Talk shows dissected every angle. Was the boy real? Who was his mother? Where had he been? And most explosively, what did this mean for the royal line of succession? Public opinion split into some called for empathy. Others called for accountability. If they'll lie about this, what else are they hiding? Asked one viral video. Protesters appeared outside Parliament demanding transparency from the monarchy. Conspiracy theories exploded online. Even government officials weighed in. A few MPs publicly requested clarity on succession law. If Charles had a son, even unofficially, what right did he hold? Was he in line? Could he claim anything? The palace media team scrambled. The official response was late and cold. No comment. But the damage was already done. The press started digging deeper. Old palace logs, travel dates, donations made to unnamed recipients. Former staff members emerged from the shadows, some confirming parts of the story, others adding new fuel. It wasn't a media frenzy, it was a media wildfire. Harry watched it unfold from a distance, but inside he wasn't celebrating. He hadn't wanted this. But now that the story was out, there was no controlling it. The secret was no longer his family's burden. It was the world's story, now succession in question. The monarchy, built on lineage and law, now faced the one thing had feared most: uncertainty. Legal experts flooded the airwaves, arguing what the discovery of a secret son could mean. Some said it changed nothing, others warned it changed everything. History was suddenly under the microscope. References were made to James Scott, Monmouth, Charles II's illegitimate son, who once claimed the throne. While dismissed in the end, his rebellion had nearly torn England apart. And now legal teams in Buckingham Palace rushed to draft statements. Advisors scoured every clause in the Succession to the Crown Act. The key question was chilling: did blood alone make a claim, or was legitimacy the only path? Polls showed a public divided. Many didn't want the mystery son to inherit anything, but others felt he had a right to be acknowledged. Even more said the monarchy should step back from succession secrecy altogether. Amid all, Charles remained silent. Aides said he was reviewing the matter, but that silence, once royal tradition, now looked like killed. The crown, long protected by law, tradition, and image, suddenly felt vulnerable. And with one photo, one test, one confrontation, everything was in question. Family fallout, often ending in silence. Meghan urged Harry to stand firm. "You've come this far," she said. "Don't stop now." Or support wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. She knew the palace would fight back and Harry needed to be ready. Kate, always the peacekeeper, began shielding their children, George, Charlotte, Louis, from headlines and questions. She asked for space, and she kept William grounded, reminding him this wasn't about politics, it was about people. Behind closed doors, a senior royal summit convened at Balmoral. No press, no leaks, just high-level damage control. Advisors debated whether to offer recognition, denial, or diversion. But trust was already broken, and whatever was decided next would have consequences. Because now the question wasn't just what to say, it was who to protect. And the cracks in the crown were starting to show. Camilla, his reflection, while the world burned with speculation and headlines. Queen Camilla stayed quiet. She didn't release a statement. She didn't sit for interviews. But inside the palace, those close to her knew this wasn't just a scandal. It was deeply personal. For decades, Camilla had learned to endure criticism. She had survived being vilified by the public, kept at arm's length by the from, and slowly rebuilt her image into something softer, respectable, regal. But this was different. This wasn't about her past with Charles or public judgment. This was about a secret kept from the family she had helped build. And now that family was unraveling. She sat with Charles night after night as he struggled to explain his choices, not just to Harry or to himself. And while she offered comfort, something inside her cracked. She wasn't angry, she was wounded, not because of the secret itself, but because of how much it threatened to undo everything they had worked to rebuild. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked him one night. Charles couldn't answer, not really, and maybe that silence said more than words ever could. Camilla looked at her grandchildren differently now. She wondered how Charlotte and George would grow up knowing their grandfather had lived with this truth buried. Would haunt them? Would it make them question the very fabric of their family? She also thought about Harry. Their relationship had never been warm, but she had tried in her own way to understand him, and now, after everything, she could only imagine what he felt: betrayal, confusion, anger. A wound reopened just when he thought he'd finally left the pain behind. In public, Camilla wore her usual composure. She stood beside Charles during engagements. She smiled for cameras, but inside she grieved, not just for the royal institution, but for the family that had lost its way. And yet, even as the walls trembled, she remained there at Charles's side, not as a consort, but as someone who knew what it meant to carry regret. She didn't speak much during the crisis, but when she did, it was simple, honest. "We can't fix this by hiding, not anymore." Truth versus tradition. Reckoning with the royal family had seen scandals before: affairs, divorces, leaks. But this was different. Because this time it wasn't the press that had broken the story. It was one of their own, a prince, a son, a voice from inside the walls demanding answers. Royal historians started speaking out. The usual protectors of palace privacy began to question the value of the institution's old silence. If the crown is built on secrecy, one road, how can I claim to represent a modern people? It wasn't just about the secret son anymore, it was about whether the monarchy could survive in an age where truth is louder than tradition. Parliament joined the chorus, not with fury, but with curiosity. Could legislation require the royals to disclose family ties? Could a private institution with public funding continue to guard its secrets in the digital age? Debates spark across the country. And beyond the UK, former colonies looked in with raised eyebrows. What did this say about monarchy in the modern world? Within the palace, a shift began. Quiet, cautious, but unmistakable advisors suggested transparency reforms. Internal discussions began about public statements, genuine ones, not cold PR releases, but real admissions of imperfection. Harry, watching from the outside, saw what he had ignited. He hadn't meant to burn the house down, but he had demanded light and rooms that had been dark for too long. And in doing so, he found something unexpected: support from the public, from allies, even from some inside the family or Charles. The reckoning was personal. He had always believed in duty above emotion, but now, as the world demanded